from what I can only assume, came from this channel's ability to slowly cover the collapse of civilization in real time. I was invited to an early playtest of Battlefield 2042, the retail build of the game. I'd like to start out by saying that up until the October beta test, Battlefield was my most anticipated game of this year, after which, my initial hype was quickly tempered by its rocky performance and questionable design decisions. To answer all your initial questions, the launch build is unbelievably more polished than the beta. There are still plenty of Battlefield specific issues that are yet to be addressed, and the specialist system obviously only exists because it's easier to make players pay for people rather than their specific gameplay mechanics. Visually, the game looks great, but to be entirely honest, it seems as if they might have toned down some of their artistic liberties to create something that's more realistic. Usually, I'd say Battlefield will always get the title as the best looking game of the day, but with such steep competition and this more muted direction, this entry might just be the exception. A lot of my creator peers had performance troubles or difficulty even playing the game. However, I appeared to be immune from the majority of these complications. The rest of the video is pretty much going to be personal opinion, so if you wanted a real review, viewers are free to go watch Skill Up. The playtest window was over 3 days, with each day relating to a different portion of the game. Day 1 was all-out warfare, which viewers might recognize from every single Battlefield game ever. These were modes like Conquest and Breakthrough, and across maps, designed for 64 players per team. In order to preserve the classic Battlefield experience, the presenter at the start of the play session told us that bots were disabled during our matches, and as it turned out, 10 minutes later, the Battlefield experience was still upheld when they clearly didn't do what they said they would. When jumping in game, the very first thing I checked was whether they'd fixed the medic specialist Maria, who you might remember was someone I had particular problems with in the beta, relating to how absolutely fucking useless they were. Unfortunately, her stim pistol doesn't revive teammates like I had hoped. However, the projectiles themselves actually seek onto nearby friendlies, meaning you don't need to be part of fucking FaZe Clan just to keep your squad mates topped up. Reviving has also been mostly fixed, with players now being able to consistently get their teammates alive, and not only that, but being able to do so no matter what class they were playing. Gone are the dark ages of having a defibrillator take up half your fucking equipment slots just so you can do your fucking job. This isn't to say that there weren't some truly useless pieces of equipment, with ammo in particular being less necessary than alcoholic Facebook mums who give life advice to their insufferable friends. This is because no one during our playtime ever stayed alive long enough to need a top up, and one of my squad mates actually got an endgame accolade because he once nearly lived for 4 whole minutes. The guns themselves were surprisingly limited from what you might expect, although I can only imagine they're saving a fair few for future seasons on their battle passes. With this in mind, their customization is indeed up to the Battlefield standard, with a ton of ammo types, sights, stocks, and gadgets that can be swapped in and out as need be. How the guns actually feel will likely be decided by Battlefield fans much more seasoned than myself, as although they seemed fine, going up against exclusively other people who do this shit for a living didn't exactly afford me the opportunity to go on impressive kill streaks. However, players can shoot people with a gun in any fucking game, and I specifically play Battlefield for the other bullshit this series allows. I'm happy to say that the SOFLAM binoculars are back, meaning just by looking at someone, you can tag enemies for your entire team to see, who will then be immediately lit up by every fucking person who has even a 1% chance of scoring a kill. I'm not even fucking joking when I say that these fucking binoculars are legitimately the strongest piece of kit that any player can use, and as I shined light on the exact locations of enemies, as they inevitably fell with the force of 1,000 suns, I became the unstoppable god of death, and I never even had to fire a shot. That was of course until I picked up Dozer and experienced the true power of the riot shield. Whether it was a combination of the damage reduction being calculated incorrectly or a bug within our version of the game, I was fucking unstoppable. Bullets were less than an inconvenience. I could one-shot anyone who dared to stand in my way, and not even the full power of a tank was enough to stop my bloodthirsty rampage. Naturally, the only morally sound course of action was to recruit my entire squad the very next round, and like the story of the 300 Spartans at fucking Thermopylae, we would hold the other team against immeasurable odds. Soldiers could not hope to oppose us, tanks came to fear our unmatched power, and every developer and content creator in the Australia-New Zealand region would bend to the whims of our unstoppable shield wall. For a while, it seemed as if the shield specialist was supposed to be like a special hero from Star Wars Battlefront, which are designed to be ridiculously strong. But after just 3 of us scored 38 melee kills in a single round, we were told to hand over our footage, after which, Shield Gang was strong no more. Shields were dead. Long live the true king of Battlefield. Battlefield has, and always will be, ruled by vehicles, and as our server had some of the best players on the continent with thousands of hours of experience, you can be absolutely certain that the playtest was no exception. In only a handful of instances was I actually able to come out on top of a well-coordinated vehicle squad, while the rest of the time I was subject to their mercy. The good news, however, is there are plenty of ways to at the very least annoy them. Navin, the hacker specialist, can disable the weapons of vehicles for a short amount of time, which although won't stop them for very long, might convince them to murder someone else. Alternatively, I always found that the trusty binoculars were enough to do the trick, as you're actually able to lock onto vehicles on behalf of other players. This means that although you're unlikely to actually take it down, the pilot will likely freak out enough to pop flares and fuck off somewhere else. I'm currently absolutely dogshit at the vehicle portion of Battlefield. However, if I were to pick it up for the long term, I'd probably learn to get good at driving, flying, or shooting these fuckers out of the sky. Day 2 was Hazard Zone, which is the battle royale mode for the game, and both myself and other content creators attending believe that this is probably what they wanted to do with the game as a whole. You're placed in a squad of 4 people and tasked with retrieving sensitive data from fallen satellites before getting the fuck out with your lives. Players familiar with Hunt Showdown or Escape from Tarkov will be familiar with the general premise, and although it's not quite as hardcore as those titles, players are still heavily incentivized to get out in one piece, as opposed to getting picked apart by NPCs or a rival player squad. There's something of a progression system, where by winning, you're able to earn currency, which can be used to take in better gear and perks in later runs. However, from our playtest, it seems like worrying about currency may become completely irrelevant within only a few hours of playtime. Of course, this is very likely subject to change. Like many battle royales, team composition can make your time a lot more bearable when attempting to get out alive. Most of the time I was the dedicated medic, which although wasn't really necessary when everyone can both revive and heal automatically over time, my squad mates certainly didn't complain. I also brought along my trusty binoculars, which came in very handy with my sniper squad member, who could absolutely fucking dome another team without them ever knowing where we were. Unfortunately, the pathfinding tool to find hard drive locations takes up a whole equipment slot, meaning you'll have to draw straws on who has to use the least interesting gadget. Perhaps an unintended strength of Hazard Zone is its more barren maps let you drink in the scenery and appreciate the environment a lot more. The capital of Qatar, slowly getting engulfed in the surrounding desert, is incredibly unnerving. The Egyptian map cut in half by a single dividing wall is like stepping into Narnia when you cross that line for the first time, and the enormous Antarctic breakaway map somehow makes it fun to trek across a frozen wasteland, which is so underrepresented in video games. After players are done taking in the sights, including the post-apocalyptic marketing campaign for Logitech, you'll be required to extract, which was always the highlight of each match. Not only will other teams attempt to punch out from the same aircraft, but swarms of bots will also attempt to prevent you from leaving, which can result in some ambushes, which will leave you overwhelmed incredibly quickly. Unsurprisingly, getting hold of a vehicle will immediately make you 10 times more likely to get out alive, as not only can you beeline it straight to the hard drive locations, but the highly accurate turret on its roof means you'll always have a significant firepower advantage against squads who don't have a ride of their own. Even just having a squad member sit in the gunner's seat while everyone else is completing the objective is going to give you a huge leg up. With this in mind, it's probably a good idea to bring a rocket launcher of your own, if not for the vehicles, but for those pesky players who try to snipe you from a distance. Most people I talked to after the event generally liked Hazard Zone a lot more than All Out Warfare. However, this mode isn't competing against the rest of the game, but rather against the entire battle royale genre as a whole. Having all out battles with 128 players is still pretty unique in the AAA space. However, battle royales have been dominating the shooter genre for several years and have come a long way from the early days of PUBG. I just find it hard to believe that players would pay for a full-priced game that doesn't necessarily play better than the hundreds of other offerings on the market, especially when they seem to have no plans to make it a live service and has far less progression than the titles they are attempting to compete against. I quite enjoyed my time with Hazard Zone, but I don't expect it'll draw me away from Apex Legends for a single match. We now come to day 3, which was Portal, the sandbox in which players could create any mode they could dream up and share it with all the world to enjoy. For those who might be out of the loop, the developers have created a mini-game engine, complete with separate maps, weapons, and even complex game logic, in which people who don't even own the game can jump in and create their own battlefield game modes. In terms of the general reception, Portal remained one of the most contentious modes among my fellow playtesters. The first mode we played was a VIP assassination match in which each team had to protect their El Presidente while assassinating the other teams to score any progress to win. This was all set on a Bad Company 2 map while playing with weapons and equipment from 1942 just because they wanted to show off. This is where we learned why there was such a lack of mainline weapons, as most of them were seemingly fan favorites brought back and recreated from previous entries. Strangely, a lot of attendees thought that the weapon handling felt a lot better in Portal, and I could be wrong, but the movement speed also appeared to be a lot faster in the cobbled together modes, which I found was a welcome change. VIP was certainly a high point for the playtest, but we'd soon learn that Portal could only be as good as the creators behind them. Next up was a stock standard free-for-all, which was generally fucking awful. The battlefield experience is fundamentally built with team play in mind and attracts people who appreciate playing objectives and being part of a larger battle, and when you try to make it a makeshift Call of Duty free-for-all mode, it really loses a lot of its magic. The fucking spawn points were particularly terrible, as very often you'd spawn within only a few meters of another player, who would either immediately kill you, or vice versa. By the second match of this mode, my entire playtest squad decided to leave, and I don't blame them for a second. The absolute worst mode that we played was rocket hopping free for all, where everyone was given a rocket launcher and a single shot, with the twist being that you needed to jump 5 times in order to reload. As much as I tend to really enjoy Battlefield, I think playing these games gives a person what I like to call battlefield fatigue, where getting consistently and unexpectedly blown up, sniped, and mowed down by a vehicle will very quickly drain your mental fortitude to keep playing, because it seems as if you're spending most of your experience lying helplessly on the ground. I would rather shit in my hands and clap than play this fucking mode again. So with this in mind, here's 40 minutes of rocket hopping without wasting your time. The last section of Portal was pretty much as if the developers recreated older games in their newer engine, and this was almost universally everyone's favorite section. Everything down to the set classes, the limited weapons, and the recreated maps were all kept intact for the developers to pump nostalgia directly into your veins. My secret, however, is although I've played a fair amount of Battlefield games in my time, my first real mainline entry was Battlefield 4, which made me immune from the nostalgia goggles that might have been influencing some of the other playtesters. The 1942 experience was fine, although when looking at how far the series has come, when you strip away that nostalgia completely, you ultimately get an experience that's pretty much just a shallower version of Battlefield 5. I'm not about to say that the experience was bad, because if anything, it was some of the most fun I had over the whole event. However, it needs to be emphasized just how important nostalgia plays in this portion of the Portal experience. The developers didn't hold back in delivering these authentic experiences either, as in some cases, going prone was disabled, as well as modern quality of life features, like being able to strafe while sprinting. The balance of previous games also seemed mostly unchanged. In the Bad Company 2 section, we all stacked the extremely fast charging mortars and single-handedly made it so taxpayers in the Battlefield universe couldn't enjoy the luxuries of healthcare or paid parental leave, but my fucking god, we had fun doing it. Battlefield 3 was also just a much prettier version of what you might remember, as although the selection of guns has been drastically reduced, details down to the excessive spotting mechanics, the revive system, and even vintage bugs were all lovingly remade and meticulously crafted to milk the nostalgia from the deep recesses of your brain. Perhaps it was the Battlefield fatigue kicking in, or the selection of modes chosen to show off Portal, but by the end of day 3, I was ready to take a break from Battlefield and start writing everything I thought I had to say. Portal in particular is likely to have the longest legs out of any of these game modes. However, I was still quite disappointed by the limited modes they decided to showcase. I personally think that after only a few weeks, Portal is going to be by far the best place to play Battlefield, as cracked game designers are going to come up with 128 player infection modes, or a juggernaut match, or even the closest thing we'll get to Titanfall 3 for a very long time. From my personal experience, I wasn't nearly as impressed as I expected at the start of the playtest, but I suspect this was very much to do with the content they had curated, as opposed to the true, very much untapped potential of what the developers have created. By now, you've probably made up your mind on whether or not you like what you see, and with all its extra features and large suite of game modes, it's certainly aiming to have something for every type of Battlefield player, even if it seems like it might be spreading itself thin in the process. 2042 does a lot right, and you certainly get a lot of content even for its AAA price tag, but viewers who aren't looking for a specific Battlefield experience might be happier to enjoy the many other titles that Battlefield is clearly attempting to imitate.
I think it's working! I'm extremely hurt! Come here! It just was Oh shit.